We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the honourable member for Page.
Thank you, Speaker. Peace and tranquility indeed. My question is to the Prime Minister. Did President Trump inform the Prime Minister that the United States would be imposing tariffs on Australian steel and aluminium prior to the measures being announced? If not, when did the Prime Minister last speak to President Trump?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question, and the Australian people know I will always stand up for them. And I will always stand up for Australia's national interests, and it is in Australia's national interest to have free and fair trade. This government has a strong record indeed of working with other nations to protect and advance Australia's trade interests. We will navigate any differences which are there diplomatically, and we will continue to make the case to the United States for Australia to be given an exemption to any steel and aluminium tariffs. We have raised with the US administration in recent ministerial discussions these issues. Australian steel and aluminium are core input to US supply chains and US-based industry. Indeed, just this morning I had a meeting with the global CEO of Rio Tinto. Australian companies have significant investments in US steel industry, creating thousands of jobs in both the US and in Australia. We will continue to make the case for Australia's national interests with the US administration, and what's more, we regard this as also being in the US's national interest as well, because tariffs, of course, don't tax us, they tax the purchasers of our products, and that is something that's very clear, and it's also a fact that the US has had a trade surplus with Australia since the Truman presidency. I have a discussion with President Trump scheduled, and I will certainly keep the House and the Australian people informed after that discussion.
The call to the honourable member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question's to the Prime Minister. What investment is the Albanese Labor government making to support the health of Australian women? And is there anything that might undermine our health system and leave Australians worse off?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the fabulous member for Macquarie for her question and for her ongoing advocacy, which is centred, of course, on her local electorate, but also on issues that affect all Australians, including, of course, Medicare. And yesterday we announced a historic $573 million investment in women's health, delivering more choice, lower costs and better health care for women. Our new investment includes the first PBS listing for new oral contraceptive pills in more than 30 years. Since last century was the last time that a government made a difference here. More bulk billing and bigger Medicare payments for long-term contraceptives, the first PBS listing for new menopausal hormone therapies in over 20 years, more endometriosis and pelvic pain clinics treating more conditions. Now, these changes will save women thousands of dollars. Australian women asked for change and we are delivering it. This announcement builds on the other work that we've done to strengthen Medicare, tripling the bulk billing incentive so more people can see a GP for free, making medicines cheaper, saving Australians more than $1 billion already as a direct result of that change. 87 urgent care clinics. We promised 50, we've delivered 87. Healthcare when you need it. More than 1 million Australians have got free care as a result. So many of those Australians have been under the age of 15. And just last week we announced $1.7 billion of additional funding for public hospitals and health services next year. This will help to cut waiting lists, it will reduce waiting times in emergency rooms and it will help with the ramping issue. Now, this is in stark contrast to the alternative approach. We know that the Leader of the Opposition was voted Australia's worst health minister. His idea of getting Medicare on track was a funding freeze and a GP tax. His idea of getting public hospitals on track was to rip $50 billion out of it and to have a new hospital tax. All the opposition leaders' tracks end up at the same place. Australians worst off and people paying more.
Give the call to the member for Page.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. When the United States imposed tariffs on steel and aluminium in 2018, the Coalition was able to work with the Trump administration to secure an exemption for Australia. What steps has Ambassador Rudd taken to secure an exemption to the tariffs announced today?
The Attorney-General will cease interjecting. Give the call to the Prime Minister.
As the member is aware, Ambassador Rudd has had a meeting with President Trump, but also what we've had is our Defence Minister over the weekend met with the US Defence Minister. Our Foreign Minister was, of course, one of the few international representatives invited to the inauguration, and we will continue to engage diplomatically with the United States, not with loud-hailers, but diplomatically. That is how we have got things done in our relationships right around the world.
Member for Cowper will cease interjecting. Give the call to the honourable member for Canberra.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Women. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to deliver more choice, lower costs and better health care to Australian women? And how does this compare to other approaches that would leave Australians worse off?
The call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Local Government and the Minister representing Women.
Thank you very much, and can I thank the member for Canberra for a question. It's an enormous privilege to be a part of a caucus that has been delivering for women, and I acknowledge the member for Canberra's role in that. And I particularly, as the Minister representing the Minister for Women, want to thank both her as well as the fantastic Assistant Minister for Health. This package would not have happened without her and her incredibly hard work. This government is building Australia's future, and we are strengthening Medicare with an investment of more than $500 million to deliver more choice, lower costs and better health care for women. Women have asked the government to make their health care a priority, and we have listened. We've announced a comprehensive package, $500 million, that works together to give women more choices across their lifetime. Some of the most commonly used contraceptive pills are being listed on the PBS. They will save women who use them between $250 to $350 a year. And the PBS listing of common menopause hormone therapies will save women using these treatments up to $290 a year or up to $577 a year if you have a concession card. These new PBS listings, the first new oral contraceptive to be listed in 30 years, and the first new menopause hormone therapies to be listed in 20 years, will take effect from the 1st of March, just 3 weeks' time. We'll also boost Medicare rebates for the insertion of IUDs and birth control implants by up to 150%, saving up to $400 in out-of-pocket costs for women accessing these devices, and that's around 300,000 women. We'll also introduce a new Medicare rebate of around $110 for menopause health assessments so women can get the care and support they need from their family GP. We're also going to be trialling accessing contraceptives and treatment for uncomplicated UTIs, very common amongst women, but not just women, directly from pharmacists. This not only means that women can get the treatment that they need quickly, but without the added cost of a doctor's visit or, in some cases, having to go to emergency departments because GP clinics are simply not open. These are very common conditions, and I know will have a material impact on the way in which women can access care. This is a package that recognises that women bear a higher cost. But what we know from those opposite, that all this is at risk. The Leader of the Opposition has form when it comes to cuts to healthcare. I was the Shadow Health Minister when he tried to introduce a GP tax, something we fought against very hard. All of these investments are at risk under those opposites.
Concluded. Before I call the honourable member for Griffith, I'll just do some acknowledgements. Pleased to inform the House today in the gallery is Mr Matt Cross MP, the member for Davidson, the New South Wales Legislative Assembly, and Councillor Nicole Johnnick, the Deputy Mayor for the City of Ipswich, and also representatives from the Royal Australian College of General Practice from across Australia are joining us today. Welcome to you all. Give the call to the member for Griffith.
To the Prime Minister, in 5 years rents have increased 55%, house prices 49%. The income a renter needs to buy a median-priced house in a capital city is $197,000. Yet the Housing Minister says Labor wants house prices to keep rising. Will Labor stop giving property investors with multiple properties big tax handouts that turbocharge house prices and deny renters the chance to buy a home, and instead finally phase out negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount?
The Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for his question. And indeed, fixing the affordable housing shortage is a big challenge for Australia. We have a plan that is focused on supply, because that is the key. Whether you want to be a homeowner, or you're a renter, or you're someone in social and affordable housing. And that's why our $32 billion Homes for Australia plan is worthy of support of everyone in this parliament. And I note that eventually the crossbenchers reluctantly got there, sort of crab-walked their way to vote for some of the plans that were put forward. And in the last sitting week of December, we passed our build-to-rent incentives that are so important for private renters in Australia to make a major difference. Those opposite here are still opposed to it. They say tax cuts for corporates. This is the same mob that want every single person who has any vague connection with a business to have free lunch for themselves and their mates. They don't regard $10 billion for free lunch for their mates as something that's largesse, but they're opposed to funding for social and public housing. They're opposed to more investment in private rentals, and they're opposed to our shared equity scheme that will make a difference as well, which has been successful in Western Australia, the model. Now, we are getting on with the job of building 1.2 million homes, and indeed there are other things that we're doing as well. Training more tradies, more apprenticeships, 20,000 fee-free TAFE places in construction, the $10,000 apprenticeship incentives that I announced at the National Press Club, something unfamiliar to most of those opposite over there, just before Australia Day, or the local infrastructure announcements that we have made, 2 rounds of local infrastructure announcements facilitating the building of new homes, whether that be through connecting electricity, connecting water, making sure that any impediments to more housing supply be removed. Our social housing policy will lead to 55,000 homes being built. We also have provided assistance in the form of increased rent assistance in back-to-back budgets, now more than 45% higher than at the election, in addition to helping 200,000 people into their first home sooner.
Give the call to the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering better health care for women? What has been the response to the government's policy?
Give the call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I wish standing orders allowed the Assistant Minister for Health to take this question. She worked so hard on this package, but I'm delighted to take the question in her stead from the member for Boothby, who's such a terrific advocate for good health policy in her community in Adelaide and in this chamber. Mr Speaker, This government has no higher priority than strengthening Medicare, and you simply can't be serious about strengthening Medicare without being serious about women's health. Women consume about 60% of all health services in this country, and they face significant costs. As every woman in this chamber and at home knows, they face significant costs simply because they're women, particularly costs around contraception and reproductive health, and costs during the period of perimenopause and menopause later in life. Two really important Senate inquiries over the course of this term of Parliament have shone a spotlight on the decades of neglect and inaction and poor service that women have received in these two areas. And the Assistant Minister worked so hard with her Advisory Council to workshop solutions to this. Yesterday was a great day for women's health in this country, Mr Speaker. Finally, we reversed decades of that neglect and inaction and have delivered women more choice, better affordability and lower costs, and better access to high-quality service, Mr Speaker. More choice and lower costs in the important area of contraception. We have some of the highest rates of unplanned pregnancies and termination in the developed world. We have declining rates of prescription of oral contraceptives. We have some of the lowest rates of access to IUDs and implants in the developed world. And the reasons for that, Mr Speaker, are pretty clear. They're very hard to access, and too often they are far too expensive. Well, this package changes that. More training for GPs on insertions and removals, higher fees for doctors providing those services, and as the Minister representing the Minister for Women said, the first new listings on the PBS for oral contraceptives for more than 3 decades, Mr Speaker. The menopause inquiry also showed decades of poor literacy in our healthcare system and poor service for women going through perimenopause and menopause. Doctors are provided only 1 hour's training on menopause across their entire 6-year degree, Mr Speaker. Well, again, we'll provide better training, we'll provide better clinical guidelines and better funded Medicare services. Unsurprisingly, Mr Speaker, this package has been broadly welcomed by doctors' groups, by nursing and pharmacy groups, and most importantly by women's organisations themselves. We're so grateful for that support and so grateful for the input that they are having. This will truly deliver women more choice, lower costs and better services in the future.
The call to the member for Longman.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, Australians are currently enduring a crippling cost of living crisis that also includes both a housing and power bill crisis. Now they're facing a collapse in bulk billing. Can the Prime Minister confirm the rate of bulk billing has declined from 88% under the Coalition to 77% today under Labor?
Order. Order. The Minister has the call.
Thank the member for Longman for that question indeed, Mr Speaker. The 88% figure the member for Longman very unwisely took from his Tactics Committee was described by the College of GPs as a misleading and highly skewed figure. A misleading and highly skewed figure. I understand why the Leader of the Opposition would use it, but why would the member for Longman take a sucker punch like that, Mr Speaker? I thought the member for Longman was smarter than that. And the reason why the College of GPs said this was misleading and highly skewed is that it took into account all of those COVID vaccination and other services that were required to be bulk billed to be delivered. The actual story of bulk billing in the last decade is a story first penned by the Leader of the Opposition when he was the Health Minister, when he said that there were too many free Medicare services, Mr Speaker, too many free Medicare services, echoing the view of his mentor, John Howard, who said that bulk billing was an absolute rort. Well, he tried to abolish bulk billing altogether and introduce a tax for every single Australian patient to pay every time they visited the GP.
The Minister for Defence Industry will cease objecting. I'm just going to invite the Minister to pause, and I want to hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. It was a very tight question in relation—
Order. Members on my right, we do not need laughter when someone is on their feet. Highly disrespectful. The manager is entitled to raise his point of order. And if anyone interjects, they won't be here to hear it. The manager's call.
The point of order is on relevance. It was a very tight question in relation to bulk billing having reduced under this government. The minister seems to have confirmed that, but he's now straying into an area that was not dealt with in the question and can't be directly relevant to the question.
On the point of order, the Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, to the point of order, the question makes clear there are only two sorts of issues that can be discussed in this: bulk billing rates under this government and bulk billing rates as they used to be before this government. And given that the minister has spent all of his answer dealing with one or the other, he's clearly in order.
The Manager on a further point of order.
Well, thanks, Mr Speaker. It's incorrect to suggest that the minister has only dealt with the question. It's very clear that the minister is now straying into areas that cannot be conceivably related to bulk billing.
The question, and I'm going to listen carefully, but the minister is on topic because part of the question, and I'll quote, says our figures are much lower than those when the coalition was in government. Now, I suggest to the manager and the House that the minister is potentially not agreeing with that and arguing the point in the question. And so whilst he was asked about figures, he was also asked about the previous government, because that was mentioned in the question. So he'll have to address that part of the question to talk about the previous government. If he wasn't asked about figures in a previous term or a previous government, he wouldn't be able to talk about that. But he is being directly relevant. But I just want to make sure that he, with his remarks, he's being directly relevant to that part of the question.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. And the history of bulk billing over the last several years, which is the point of the question, is very clear. When the Leader of the Opposition, the former Health Minister, was not able to get his GP tax through the Senate, instead he initiated a 6-year freeze to the Medicare rebate that the College of GPs said when we were coming to government had resulted in a free fall in bulk billing. Now, we have put record investments to turn that around. But if there is an issue with bulk billing in this country, and we'd like to see it higher than it currently is, it all lies at the feet of this man, the Leader of the Opposition, who, as the Prime Minister said, was voted by Australia's doctors as the worst health minister in the history of Medicare. And if that verdict is not enough, Mr Speaker, perhaps another verdict is that the former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, thought he was so bad he didn't let him even deliver a second health budget.
That's right.
Order. The Minister for Climate Change and Energy will cease interjecting, so I can hear from the member for Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. Why did the Albanese Labor government put an end to the golden ticket visa scheme? What has been the response, and is the minister aware of any other threats to the integrity of our visa system?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Speaker, and I thank the member for Hunter for raising what's a very important issue in what he's described as the golden ticket visa, or what's otherwise historically been known as cash for visas, for the very simple reason that it's a visa you qualify for because you have cash. Now, on the 31st of July last year, this government closed applications to that visa. No one has been able to apply for the visa since then, and it will take some time to deal with the mess that was created by the previous government on that. A mess which was contributed to by a lack of compliance staff. If I explain, before I get to lack of compliance staff, just to go a little bit further on this visa, the Productivity Commission had made clear that in a program where you have a limited number of permanent visa applications that get approved, every one of these visas takes away from another part of the program, and when they have costed what it is to take away from permanent skilled migration, the cost to the Australian economy, not our figures, Productivity Commission figures, $2.5 billion. There are good reasons why this government got rid of applications for that visa. The problems became embedded with the nature of the visa as a visa you qualify for because you have cash, combined with an obsession from the Leader of the Opposition when he held my job to cut the compliance staff within the department, the people who were there employed to make sure that the system had integrity. They were the ones he targeted and took down from 360 of them down to 203 of them. From 360 down to 203, it was the compliance staff that he decided to target. Now, we first found out that this visa would be on the way back under the Leader of the Opposition, not through an announcement, We know from the Sunday Telegraph it wasn't because of a shadow cabinet process or a party room process. No. This came about, we found out, because someone asked him a question at a fundraiser, and once again there was a boom mic overhead. That's how the public found out about this. And I'll tell you what, for the Australian people, that was not a free lunch. That one was in no way a free lunch. The Nixon Review had found, under his leadership, mass exploitation of vulnerable individuals, as well as syndicates running brothels and engaging in sexual exploitation, even human trafficking. The Productivity Commission on Cash for Visas had said, and I quote, "There is no case for retaining this category of permanent visa. If you believe in the integrity of the program, you don't reintroduce cash for visas."
Call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Attorney-General. In October 2019, the now Attorney-General said in this place, and I quote, "Labor's opposition to mandatory sentencing is well known. It is no secret. It is spelled out in our national platform. Let me be clear, we do not support mandatory sentencing." With this in mind, and having been steamrolled by the Prime Minister on a bill that passed the House last week, can the Attorney-General please detail the benefits of mandatory sentencing, which he now strongly supports?
Order. The Minister for Climate Change and the Minister for Housing will cease interjecting. Order. No. Deputy's entitled to ask her question in silence out of respect to the House, and the Attorney hasn't even begun interjecting, so no one will interject. The Attorney has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for her question. No government has done more to combat the abhorrent and shocking rise in anti-Semitism than this government. The Liberals talk about it, and this government acts.
Order. Members on my left and my right. That's far too much noise. The Attorney has the call.
The Liberals are still baying and shouting and talking. This government acts on anti-Semitism. We have legislated to ban the Nazi salute and hate symbols. We have legislated to criminalise the glorifying of terrorist acts and possessing violent extremist material. We've legislated to criminalise doxing. Those opposite voted against that. And now the parliament has come together to pass a bill which criminalises hate speech. It's legislation that represents the toughest laws Australia has ever had against hate crimes. The legislation is a direct response to the hateful conduct happening on our streets, at our schools, in our communities. We're sending a clear and unambiguous message that advocating or threatening violence is not acceptable. It is criminal behaviour and it will be treated as such. We want all Australians to feel safe and valued in our community, and that's what good governments do. They unite the country against hate.
Attorney-General will just pause. The Minister was asked about the benefits of mandatory sentencing, and he's reading to the House about the legislation and the requirements. So I just want to give the Deputy Leader some assistance, because if you're asking a question about what are the benefits, he's listing that to the House. But, Minister, just if he can continue to make sure his answer is being relevant or directly relevant to the question and not stray into other topics, that will assist the House as well.
I thank the Speaker for that assistance. In the past few months, I've stood in the shadow of the main gate at the Auschwitz death camp. I've stood on the field where a music festival in Israel was turned into a bloodbath, and I've stood in the ruins of a burnt-out synagogue in my hometown. But those opposite have taken every opportunity since the 7th of October 2023 to politicise the trauma and the experiences of the Jewish people. Order. I do not need the Leader of the Opposition or any of those opposite to tell me what anti-Semitism is or how seriously I should take it. You're disgusting.
Order. Order. The Minister for the Environment, the Assistant Foreign Minister, the manager is entitled on his feet. I'll give him the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I move the member be no longer heard.
Order. Order. No, members on my right. Order. Members on my right will cease. Order. When the House comes to order, the motion before the House is that the minister no longer be heard. I'll put the question. Those opinions say aye. Against no. No. The noes have it. Ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes.
You okay, Terry?
Lock the doors. The question before the House is the member no longer be heard. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair and the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Parkes and Gray as tellers for the ayes and the honourable members for Werriwa and Bean as tellers for the noes. Order. The result of the division is ayes 52, noes 91. The matter is resolved in the negative. Order. Members can resume their seats as quickly and as quietly as possible. The Attorney-General has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker.
Order. Order. No. The members on my right. The manager on a point of order.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I request that the Attorney-General withdraw his highly disorderly and unparliamentary remarks and offensive remarks. There's nothing more serious than the opposition being accused of politicising an issue like this. He also uttered the words disgusting on at least half a dozen occasions.
All right, we'll deal.
At least half a dozen, Mr Speaker.
We'll deal with this.
So we request a withdrawal.
We'll deal with this. We'll deal with this quickly, because I want question time to continue. I didn't hear, because of obviously the audible noise. I'm going to ask the Attorney-General, as he comes back to answer the question, he just withdraw the unparliamentary. I didn't hear what was said, so it's very difficult for me as the chair to make a judgment here when I don't hear. But I'm willing to hear from other members as well. The Prime Minister has the call.
On the point of order, Mr Speaker, the decision by the opposition to try to shut down.
Order. Order. No, the manager had a good go. The Prime Minister will be given the same. Just everyone listen to each other. Prime Minister.
To try to shut down the minister, given the statements that have been made by many members of the opposition about a range of people on this side of the House, the idea that the minister should withdraw a statement is, quite frankly, totally inconsistent with things that have been said by those opposite over a considerable period of time. The minister, due to who he is, the idea that he is not a strong opponent of anti-Semitism, he is someone who feels this very personally and deeply. He was being interjected against by those opposite in behaviour that I regard as completely disorderly and completely unacceptable.
Okay. Look, the manager on further point of order.
Mr Speaker, a couple of points. Firstly, you've requested that the Attorney-General withdraw, which I think is the right course of action, so the Speaker has made that request. Secondly, the question was in relation to mandatory minimum sentencing. There was no invective in the question targeted at the Attorney-General. The Prime Minister somehow said that the Attorney-General was goaded into his unparliamentary remarks. That's not an excuse anyway, but quite frankly, it's clear-cut here that there are few more disgusting accusations that could be made in this House. You've requested that the Attorney-General withdraw, and he should.
Order. Just so that we're clear, now that I'm in the picture, you're saying that the word disgusting should be withdrawn. That is not unparliamentary and has been used. Look, this is an emotive debate. I can appreciate that, and members have every right to feel grievances on either side. I want this debate to continue. I want question time to function, but I'll hear from the Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, a second point of order was raised by the manager during that with respect to relevance. And just on that, I want to say that the question referred to an amendment to a piece of legislation, and the Attorney-General has been referring to that piece of legislation. You can't refer to the penalties without referring to the crime, and therefore it is completely relevant. It is completely relevant to what was asked.
Okay. The order. The member for Solomon. The manager on a further point of order.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Just to be very clear, the words we are offended by and seeking that the Attorney-General withdraw is that we're politicizing anti-Semitism. Politicizing anti-Semitism. Now, that would be quite an extraordinary ruling for this House to allow an accusation like that to be made. To the Leader of the House's point, I only raised the context of the question in response to the Prime Minister, who somehow stated that the Attorney-General was goaded into his unparliamentary remarks, which was clearly not the case.
Order. The Leader of the House.
Now that the Manager Opposition Business has clarified what he wants withdrawn, withdrawal has to be made at the first opportunity. I would dispute that it was unparliamentary given what's been said by the opposition in a number of debates. But notwithstanding that, the Manager Opposition Business after that point stood up, went to the dispatch box and did not ask for it to be withdrawn. He chose to have the House vote instead. The House has now voted and the answer should proceed.
I want the House— no, we've got to move on. I can appreciate the argument. I'm going to say to the Attorney-General, please use language which is parliamentary and that does not cause offence to any other members. Despite the emotive nature of this, the opposition are entitled to— order. No, the Leader of the Opposition. I'm making a statement to the House. We need to get through question time. I want the Attorney-General to use language which is appropriate and not cause offence to any other members for the remainder of his answers. If he does invoke such language, he will be sat down immediately. The Attorney-General, for the last 34 seconds. The Leader of the Opposition on point of order.
Mr Speaker, to your words that you've just offered to the House, it is with long-standing precedent in this place that if offensive words are uttered by a Minister of the Crown, which in this case they most certainly have, that is not in dispute. The argument that the argument that the Leader of the House puts is that not that the words were unparliamentary or required. His point is that they weren't dealt with in the first instance. Now, again, that is an argument that fails because the course of action taken was, given the offensive nature of it, we responded in a way that was obviously proportionate to what were discussed in comments. Now, there is a long precedent, not to mention the fact, Mr Speaker, that your predecessors have required, even if they haven't heard the words themselves, for the minister to withdraw that statement. That was your instinct, rightly. That was your direction to the minister. And now, with the weight of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the House trying to—
Members on my right.
Mr Speaker, their words from the Prime Minister, that ramble that he provided before, should have no bearing on your decision whatsoever, and you shouldn't be bullied into a position which was against your natural and right instinct.
The order. Order. The original words were different, and now it's been clarified. I understand the point. I'm going. Just, I'll get you. The member for Warringah has been on her feet waiting for the call, so she's been very patient, and everyone deserves, if they have a view, to be heard on this matter. The member for Warringah on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I wish just to raise concern about the arguments raised in this respect around this is a policy issue, and it's clearly a decision of members of this House to disagree with government policy or to raise an issue in the context of question time around a policy. As such, describing that as politicising an issue is very much what it is. And so I would ask for, I would suggest, submit, or whatever the right way of putting it, is that if that is considered unparliamentary or grounds for withdrawal or refusal, it would mean any area of policy where there is disagreement becomes something that is objectionable because it is essentially being politicised. And so I am concerned at the way in which this is positioned, because it's the same as the nature of a policy being racist or anything like that. These are policy differences, and that is the very nature of this place.
I thank the member for Warringah. The manager on a further point of order.
I would just note, Mr Speaker,
members on my right,
you have directed the Attorney-General to withdraw, and there is precedent for members to be named where they refuse to withdraw unparliamentary remarks.
Okay. I'm not going to accept any further points of order on this. I'm drawing a line under this exchange, and I'm asking the Attorney-General to be careful with his language, to always respect members and not use inoffensive language, and I'll give him the call to conclude his answer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm the son and the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. I went to the commemoration of the liberation of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, a place where 1 million Jews were murdered, a place where my great-grandmother was murdered on the 13th of October 1942. And I say to members of this House that we've had a wave of anti-Semitism in this country, and right now what we need is unity. We need bipartisanship, and that's the effort that our government made with the bill that was passed by this parliament last week.
Give the call to the honourable member for Chisholm.
Thanks so much, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How is the Albanese Labor government helping Australians with the cost of living? What alternative economic approaches would leave Australians worse off?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Chisholm not just for her question, but for being a key part of our efforts to provide cost of living help by her work on our Caucus Economics Committee. And because of the work of this side of the House, Mr Speaker, there are tax cuts flowing to every taxpayer. There is energy bill relief to every household. There's cheaper medicines, cheaper early childhood education, more rent assistance, better wages, fee-free TAFE, and after the election, if we win, more student debt relief, Mr Speaker. And we've been able to provide this cost of living help at the same time as we've delivered 2 surpluses in our first 2 years. Now, because of our responsible economic management, inflation is down, wages are up and unemployment is low. And on the inflation front, Mr Speaker, we got a very important and interesting contribution today from the economists at Westpac. And what they said at Westpac when they dramatically lowered their expectations for inflation this quarter and next quarter, Mr Speaker, is, and I quote, "Core inflation is moderating faster than anticipated," and I also quote, "The moderation in core inflation is fundamental." Now, they've lowered their inflation forecast for headline inflation to 2% in this quarter and 1.7% next quarter, not just within the Reserve Bank's target band but below it, Mr Speaker. And for trim mean underlying inflation, they're now expecting 2.7 this quarter and 2.4 next quarter, not just within the target band but in the lower half of the target band, Mr Speaker. And when we came to office, inflation was much higher and rising. Now it is lower and falling, Mr Speaker, and that's because this side of the House has been focused on the cost of living, while that side of the House is focused on cuts and conflict and culture wars, Mr Speaker. Now, after 3 years of opposition, those opposites still don't have any costed or coherent or credible economic policies. All they have is secret costs and secret cuts which will make people worse off. And the reason they will make people worse off on that side of the House is that they can't find $10 billion a year for free long lunches, or they can't find the $350 billion in cuts they say they want to impose. They can't find the $600 billion they need for this nuclear fantasy without going after Medicare again, without going after pension indexation, without going after housing and without going after wages, Mr Speaker. And so the choice at the election is going to be really, really clear, Mr Speaker. That coalition of cuts and conflict and culture wars, making Australians worse off and taking Australia backwards, or this Prime Minister and his Labor government getting on top of this inflation challenge, rolling out the cost of living help, making things better for people when it comes to the tax cuts and energy bill relief, and building Australia's future.
The call to the member for Menzies.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The last time the Prime Minister stood with his close friend and factional ally, Premier Jacinta Allen, the Prime Minister thanked the Premier for her, quote, leadership. But Premier Allen has tanked Victoria's economy, piled up the debt and made Melbourne's suburbs less safe. Why is the Prime Minister taking the failed policies of the Victorian state Labor government to a national level?
Order. The last part of the question is in order, but really the first part, the Prime Minister is not responsible for other governments, but as long as he makes his answer relevant to what he's responsible for, it's in order.
I think it has to be pretty broad, that one, Mr Speaker. The member for Menzies has lost, Mr Speaker. He thinks he's in, I'm not sure what the street, the Parliament's in, Spring Street. He thinks he's in Spring Street, Mr Speaker. Well, what my government has done is to work constructively with state and territory governments across the board. We work constructively with the governments, for example, of Queensland Premier David Crisafulli and the Northern Territory Chief Minister Leah Finocchiaro, who I was with. There's a bit of an Italian connection with us three, of course. And we work constructively, not just on building the economy and creating jobs, but opposing his opposition's nuclear plan going forward, because that's absolutely friendless. And what I did when I would have been with the Victorian Premier was to sign an agreement to deliver additional schools funding for every Victorian student. And I make no apologies for that as well. Over $16 billion on the table to make sure that every student in the great state of Victoria, just like we want in every state, to get the best opportunity in life through a better education. And the way that you do that is by dealing with the reforms that were put in place and recommended by David Gonski all those years ago, 14 years ago. But it's taken the re-election of a Labor government to fulfil the vision of David Gonski and another great Victorian representative, former Prime Minister Julia Gillard. And that is what we are doing. Just like last week, we had $1.7 billion, including substantial additional funding for Victorian hospitals. Now, the question for the member for Menzies is he against that additional hospital funding? Is he against the additional education funding? Because the member for Menzies, when I was in his electorate, or what will be his electorate that he's running for at the next election just a short while ago, where the Leader of the Opposition was advocating his newfound love of China and all things that are connected with China for Lunar New Year. They were up there talking about getting back on track. Now, every Australian will know what that means. Back to rising inflation, back to wages deliberately low, back to aged care in crisis, back to bulk billing and freefall, back to childcare being out of reach, back to chasing manufacturing offshore, back to veterans waiting years for benefits they earn, back to chaos and multiple ministries. That's what they presided over. Keep that in mind next time you hear someone talk about back on track.
Give the call to the honourable member for Hawke.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Early Childhood Education. How is the Albanese Labor government reforming the early childhood education and care sector to support families with the cost of living? Is there anything that could put this at risk and leave families worse off?
Give the call to the Minister for Early Childhood Education, the Minister for Youth and the Minister assisting the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the amazing member for Hawke for his question. The member for Hawke gets it. He gets that an investment in early childhood education is an investment in an essential service that parents right across Australia rely on. A service that helps parents, especially women, get back into the workforce and allows children to access those really transformational benefits of early childhood education and care. And that's why, Mr Speaker, the Albanese Labor government has embarked on an ambitious reform agenda, one that is principled on three pillars, underpinned by tackling affordability, supply and accessibility, and workforce stability. And, Mr Speaker, we've made significant progress across all of those three, but especially on affordability. Our cheaper childcare reforms have provided over 1 million Australian families with cost of living relief by cutting the cost of early learning. Our departmental data shows that a family earning $120,000 a year, accessing 30 hours of early childhood education and care a week, are better off by $2,768 since September 2023. Now, Mr Speaker, that's more than $2,000 better off because of the policies of this Albanese Labor government. And that's not all. We've linked our historic early childhood wage increase to fee caps, so providers can't increase their fees by more than 4.4% in the first year and 4.2% in the second year, lifting workers' wages while putting downward pressure on fees for families. But I am asked if there's anything that could put all of this at risk and leave families worse off. The risk, of course, is that the coalition will take us back to the days of high out-of-pocket expenses, when the cost of early childhood education skyrocketed by a staggering 49% when they were last in government. Now, the opposition doesn't have a policy, a plan or a vision for families or for early childhood education. Their only plan is a $350 billion worth of cuts and a taxpayer-funded long lunch. We'll invest $1 billion to build early learning in the suburbs and the regions where they need them. We'll guarantee every child has access to at least 72 hours of subsidised early childhood education and care per fortnight. We'll continue to tackle affordability and out-of-pocket costs. We'll ensure that early childhood education workers earn more and keep more of what they earn. Only a Labor government will take action to ensure that Australian families have access to quality, affordable early childhood education and care.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Mackellar.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Prime Minister. For the first time in modern history, our young people will be worse off than their parents. They face converging crises of climate, environment, housing, mental ill health and so much more. It's clear our short-term, siloed thinking is failing us. Today I introduce the Wellbeing of Future Generations Bill. Prime Minister, will you consider adopting my bill, which requires a long-term lens and the well-being of future generations to be considered in all government and public policy decision-making? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Mackellar for her question and for her advocacy, and I certainly commit to having a look at the ideas that have been put forward by the member for Mackellar, who plays a constructive role in this chamber. I certainly agree and have spoken about including in the speech that I gave at the National Press Club about the question of intergenerational equity, because it is a genuine feeling that people have arising out of the changed circumstances which are there facing young Australians. Young Australians are very concerned about not just their economic position and the fast-changing nature of workplaces and their experiences in life, but also about dealing with the challenge of climate change and the fact that people who say, oh, well, you can't make a difference immediately, forget the fact that generations that will inherit our climate are not ones that have benefited from the growth that came from fossil fuels in the 20th century and 21st century. Certainly one of the things that we've done is establish the Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee. The Minister for Youth is very active as well in re-establishing an Office of Youth Affairs. So it didn't exist before we were elected to government. We've delivered on our commitment to deliver a more robust intergenerational report in the middle of every year term, and also one of the things, reason why we're targeting debt is that makes a difference. It's now $177 billion lower in 24-25 than what was forecast at the time of the election. We're also, of course, investing in children's education, whether it be from early education, early learning, with our childcare reforms, the school reforms I just spoke about as well, moving towards fair school funding as identified by Gonski all those years ago, right through to free TAFE and to universities. The cutting of student debt by 20% is about intergenerational equity, is about acknowledging the concern and pressure that young people are on, and more than 3 million Australians will benefit by an average of $5,000 if we're re-elected as government. As one of the first actions that we do is to introduce that legislation in our second term. We're also, of course, building more homes for Australians, which is important. We're investing in future jobs through our Future Made in Australia. And our climate change action is the thing that young people, when I travel to, particularly to high schools, is raised with me perhaps more than any other issue around Australia, and I'm sure that's the case in the member for Mackellar's electorate as well.
Has concluded. The call to the honourable member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Sport. How is the Albanese Labor government investing to help aged care workers upskill, earn more and keep more of what they earn? How does this compare to other approaches to aged care which would leave people worse off?
The call to the Minister for Aged Care and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for Werriwa for her question and for all the wonderful work that she does looking after recipients of aged care in Werriwa. The Albanese government is firmly focused on the issues that matter to Australians, easing the cost of living whilst fighting inflation, providing opportunities to upskill in a future made in Australia, And as the Minister for Aged Care, I would argue that our commitment to delivering on these issues is best reflected through us prioritising aged care workers. Since 2023, the Albanese government has invested more than $15 billion to increase the award wage for more than 250,000 aged care workers. And under the Albanese government, registered nurses are earning an extra $14,685 every single year. And with Labor's tax cuts, they're keeping an extra $1,745 in their pocket. Personal care workers with a Certificate 3 are more than $10,573 a year better off. With Labor's tax cuts, they are also keeping an extra $1,166 in their pockets. And while we're helping aged care workers earn more and keep more of what they earn, we're also making it more affordable for them to go to TAFE and to uni so that they can provide high-quality care to older Australians. This is helping workers like Elizabeth, whom I met at Southbank TAFE a few weeks ago. Elizabeth is one of the 130,000 students who have enrolled in a care course through fee-free TAFE. Elizabeth has worked in aged care for 2 years. She absolutely loves it. She told me, and I quote, "I feel like I have 100 bonus grandmothers and grandfathers as a result of my work." And 2 years into aged care, Elizabeth was inspired to enrol in a diploma of nursing to become an enrolled nurse, something she could only dream of doing thanks to fee-free TAFE. But, Mr Speaker, I was asked how the government's cost of living support for aged care workers compares with the coalition's. And I can tell the member for Werriwa that Elizabeth would be significantly worse off under the coalition, because those opposite have never supported a pay rise for aged care workers, and those opposite have never supported fee-free TAFE. Instead, Mr Speaker, the coalition's big, secretly costed policy is allowing companies to take potential clients out to taxpayer-funded lunches and entertainment. So the news for Elizabeth is under a coalition government, she wouldn't get a pay rise or tax cuts or affordable higher education. She wouldn't get help to care for her bonus grandfathers and grandmothers. But according to the coalition's publicly defined parameters of their own policy, business could spend up to $20,000 of Elizabeth's own taxpayer funds to attend something like, for example, the Super Bowl, to lather themselves in buffalo wings and baby back ribs nodding along to Kendrick Lamar, all subsidised by the Australian taxpayer. Mr Speaker, this is just another reason why those opposite are not like us. They're not like us.
The call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I ask further questions be placed on the notice paper.